Hello and welcome back to another episode of Tomorrow by Design. Yes, it's been a while, but we're back almost at the end with quite the episode, I must say, full of golden nuggets around a topic that looks like it could be a regular amongst the TBD world, I'd say. Culture in design. And who better to get into the episode other than the architect of one of the most famous buildings that we know along the Nairobi skyline, the FCB Mihrab. I won't say much. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tomorrow by Design. Yes, we are still alive. Yes, we are still recording these things. Yes, you will see us for a very long time. My name is Louis, and I am one of four hosts, one of which was not able to make it, but the rest are here. So next we have
Annie. Agesa, I'm also one of the four. Sid tunakuona, we miss you. Let me give the next host, let her say her name herself. Sema tukusikie.
Tukusikie. Sorry.
the door.
I expected no less. You need to leave.
All right, bye guys. Hi, my name is Lian Munyori. Sid. Yeah, fine. Not
Okay.
fine for okay, but fine for the kitty. Like, drop some shillings there.
Wow. Anyway, yeah, in the missing jar.
Yes.
Okay. Niko na swali by the way. This is thing.
Lisa.
Utatoka huku Nairobi saizi. You find yourself, however you find yourself till you go to Mombasa. But the moment you hit Mombasa tu hivi tu, or you smell that tropical air, or that salty air, or that humid air, I'll stop there. Your accent changes. Tayari ushaanza kusema shingapi, kaka mdogo. There's something that happens.
How recently did this happen to you, Louis?
Every single time, I won't lie. Every single time. Is that happens, and then whatever happens when you go to other places, like when you go to Kijabe Tayari, you just feel like you're already unaweza panda mlima yani.
Yeah, I get you. Like the environment starts influencing you to do some things, to act some type of way. You want to be more cultured.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is so true. I'm trying to think if, like when I go to Machakos, if my accent changes.
You know what? Mine doesn't. Have I ever been to Machakos? I don't know. But
I mean,
ukienda Murima, to the mountains.
Atukuzi.
You go to the mountains, does your accent change? Do you start acting culturally
appropriate?
Yes, appropriate. Let's say that. Yeah.
Yeah. When in Rome, when in Murema.
Act as Murema. Yeah. Yeah.
Do what it does.
Do what it be doing. Yeah. So what's around us really affects how we behave, or at least it makes us feel like we're supposed to behave a certain way. Is that what it is with the built environment?
Yeah. The built environment, the built environment, mostly when you see the buildings and everything, it just has this, I think the right word to use is aura, I guess, towards this. So, and each place is unique. Mombasa has its own vibe. Eldoret has its own vibe. Nairobi, of course, has its own vibe. And that I think is what I wanted to try and see if I can scratch that itch today, because it's been something that's been on my mind for quite some time. And who else to help us other than one of the
drum rolls,
actually, the architects of one of the most popular buildings that I think everyone knows in Nairobi. If you've walked about in Hurlingham and I've seen this very tall, iconic building with very interesting looking geometric features, very Islamic vibe to it because it is home to an Islamic banking institution, if I'm not wrong, FCB Mihrab. Please help me in welcoming cultural architects. I don't say cultural architect, but architects with an expertise in how to incorporate cultural design in the projects, as we've seen from the portfolio. And I'm sort of butchering this, so I'll just leave it to them to be able to introduce themselves. Help me in welcoming Brek. I'm gonna navigate.
Pull up and come back again, selector.
Thank you, Leo, and Tomorrow by Podcast, Tomorrow by Design. My name is Yasir Brek. I work at Morphosis Limited. It's a local architectural firm incorporated way back in 2005. Yes, and yeah, we have been in the space for a while. Trying to understand it and mask this thing that we call architecture. What is it? I'm still grappling with it, and believe it or not, after many years of work, sometimes you go back to the drawing board and ask yourself, what is this thing, and what is it that we are trying to achieve? It's quite a complex thing, so many facets into it. But yeah, that's who I am, and that is what I do on a day-to-day basis. Whenever I wake up and whenever I go to sleep, those are some of the things that still running through my head.
Thanks, man. Okay, cool. So it's really interesting, like just to give context to see some of the projects that you've handled, aside from FCB also, we've seen some other projects where there's a uniqueness that you brought to it. And I think that's what from the conversations we had actually before, there's something very interesting that you mentioned that we'd like to get into today. So as Morphosis, or rather, yeah, as Morphosis, as yourself, and some of the portfolio that you've had, what do you think is the secret behind designing buildings that truly reflect the culture and community they serve? Aside from just the aesthetics, is there more to it?
Definitely. I mean, aesthetics is makeup. That's what it is. Aesthetics, most of the time you look at it as makeup, but then you go down into what is actually the heart and soul of that particular building, just like a human being. What is the heart and soul of that particular person? What kind of a character does that particular individual has? And that is the whole essence of architecture. Now, again, looking back, or looking at a human being, and I usually again give this kind of an example. All of us are actually the same. If you look at our functions, our inner functions are more or less the same. We all have a heart. We all have the blood vessels that are running through our bones, through our body. Same type of bone structure. All through, there isn't much of a differentiation as such. Apart from obviously the envelope, which you would want to call the skin, that is what now would start differentiating us. And I would look different from somebody else, and somebody else would look different from somebody else, and so on and so forth. But the most important part that differentiates us even more is not just the envelope, but actually our own character and our own being and our own behaviors. That really differentiates us. The same thing in architecture. Architecture, I mean, if it's a house is a house. There might be a few variations here and there depending on the cultural affiliation of that particular individual. But more so, we usually ask ourselves, then what is the soul? What is the heart and soul of this particular building? What is it trying to communicate? And I think that's really the main issue regarding architecture. When you look at it on a cultural setting, then you look at what is it that then would identify it and make it entrenched within a particular culture, within a particular group of people. And that becomes a very difficult question sometimes to be able to answer. Like I was saying at the introductory part, we have been trying to be able to understand then how do you integrate culture, how do you integrate aesthetics within a modern context, so that at the same time it doesn't stand out as an alien thing that is being imposed, but at the same time be able to move with modernity, not a replica of what people have been doing 100 years ago, but a reinterpretation of that. And then several things come into mind. One of the main aspects of a cultural entrenched design is then how are you integrating the aspects of living of the people within the design itself? How do the people live? And therefore, we should be able to look at how do they live? How are their mannerism? And how then do we incorporate that in some cultures? For instance, the living spaces would be outward, others would be inward, and so forth and so on. And again, the building itself does not stand as a separate piece from its neighbors. How does it sit within its community? Just like you and I, how do we fit in within an entire larger community? So those are sometimes questions that we usually ask ourselves, and sometimes it's quite difficult to get a grasp of it all because of the complexity of this entire thing called culture, and how then are we going to integrate that into architecture? So it's quite a complex subject. Back to your question is then how are you able to integrate culture into architecture? Again, that comes back to number one, we need to be able to understand the culture that we're dealing with. Who are we designing for? What kind of a setting are we in? And this particular client who has come to us, what are their aspirations? What is it that they think is to them is really the heart and soul of whatever that they want to build? So number one is just to be able to understand the culture that you live in. In some of our projects that we have done, we have looked at the culture of where the building sits in. For instance, there's a project that we did in Isinya. It was to be an Islamic university, and we looked at it, we said, okay, it's an Islamic university. I mean, it's very easy for us to be able to integrate Islamic motifs and Islamic designs within that and just place it there. But then we said that would look a bit alien. What else can we do? Can we integrate the local culture into what we want to call Islamic culture? And then we looked at Maasai culture and looked at, can we be able to integrate Maasai culture into Islamic culture? And at that point in time, we came up with almost like a slogan for that particular design brief, and we call it Maslamic, meaning it's a fusion between Maasai and Islamic culture. Looking at Maasai culture, looking at Islamic culture, and how these can be integrated. And within it, they can be able to sit within an environment that the local people would be able to look at it and say, yes, this is actually our building. And somebody else who is coming in with an Islamic background can be able to look at it and be able to identify some of the nuances on that particular project. So that's basically how it stands out now. Looking at the culture that is there, one of the things that we looked at is building from the earth, building from what is available. And one of our first criteria that we did was we will not get material far away from the site. We actually limited ourselves to a 20-kilometer radius, that all our materials would come from within a 20-kilometer radius from the site. And we tried by and large to be able to do that as much as is possible. Almost 70% of the materials actually came from within a 20-kilometer radius. The other thing is, again, you're looking at in terms of planning, how is this entire development going to be planned together? And again, we looked at how, for instance, Maasai would be able to plan their residences, which is quite similar actually to what Islamic urban design would be able to do when you're looking at different buildings, centered around or organized within a central space. Mm-hmm. And again, that's what we did. And then we took some of the elements of design motifs of Islamic architecture or Islamic patterns, and then we looked at the Maasai beadwork, mm-hmm. and started interrogating that, and looked at the beadwork. When you look at it, is actually extremely geometric and it's quite regular. There's a certain pattern that comes of it, and we picked that pattern and now regenerated it into what you might consider as an Islamic pattern and use that throughout the building as just a pattern. So that's one of the things that was very nice, that we actually be able to do that. Pick a local pattern and more or less what you might want to call morph it into something that if the Maasai would have a look at it, they would say, yeah, this is our pattern. And if somebody who understands Islamic patterns and Islamic geometry would look at it, they would say, yes, this is actually an Islamic pattern, and be able to incorporate that with the colors and everything that comes with it. The bright red colors and all that, and actually be able to use that quite successfully, in my opinion, in that particular project. So how you integrate culture then is like I'm saying then is, apart from the patterns that then are getting used, materials that you are going to use that are within the very locale that is being used, is to be able now to go back to the heart and soul. And what is the heart and soul of architecture is about the living spaces or the usable spaces within the building and outside the building, and be able to look at that and be able to see how is the planning done, and therefore can we incorporate that type of planning within our designs and be able to use that, so that if somebody would be able to walk into that house or that development within that particular locale, they would be able to identify it very easily. It's like, yes, this is, I can feel my way around. I can actually feel a sense of belonging in this particular space. So by and large, that is how you'd be able to look at incorporating culture into architecture or into urban design. That is how you'd look at it. In my opinion, it's very important for anyone to be able to do that. There's a concept in architecture, we call it critical regionalism, where the building has to be able to sit within its context. Of course, there are others who argue about it, against it, and so forth and so on. There are others who are saying, for instance, like if you look at Nairobi, cosmopolitan society, what culture does it have? You've talked about, you were in Machakos the other day. So guys from Machakos will be coming in. I'm coming from the coast, so I'm here. You'd find the Europeans who are coming in. They're coming, people from the western part of the country who are coming in, people from the northern part of the country, people from all over the world coming in. And therefore, the question that would be asked is, for a cosmopolitan society or a cosmopolitan city like Nairobi, what is its culture? And therefore, if you're to design within Nairobi, what culture would you peg yourself in? And what is it that you're going to do?
Yeah.
And that became a question that we asked ourselves when we did the Mihrab project here in Nairobi. Is like, should we do something that is quite local, or should we look at something that is alien? Here we are. We have a client who's coming in. At that time, First Community Bank was the premier Islamic bank. They're the first Islamic bank in the country, and they wanted to announce their presence. And they're saying we need to have a very iconic Islamic building text that might not necessarily be Islamic. Is that okay? Is that fine? And we looked at case studies on how to go about it. How do we deal with that? And we looked at several projects right now which are quite iconic within Nairobi. For instance, the Memorial Library. Most of these colonial buildings that were done. We looked at the Jamia Mosque itself. Jamia Mosque is typically of an Indian origin. Most of the cathedrals in the country are totally alien, but somehow people have come to be able to identify itself. And I think that is what gives richness to a society, that once you have all this kind of a mix put in together within a certain region, identifying each other's culture, then you find, if properly planned, you find the entire place becomes extremely rich within its architecture. And it has happened more so in history. Going back to, for instance, Old Town Mombasa. Old Town Mombasa is another melting pot of many cultures. You have the Swahilis who have been there for years and years, been native on that particular area. You've had the Arabs who've come in, Persians who've come in, Chinese who've come in, the Portuguese who at one point in time came into the scene. And then you have the British who also came in much earlier on the 20th century. So all these things came together, and somehow everyone brought in their nuances on how the buildings were done, using local materials at the same time, but also coming in with a bit of touch from their own cultures. And when you look at it, especially the Old Town part of Mombasa, it's quite vibrant in terms of its architecture, and that is what has been able to be identifiable as Mombasa Old Town. Our languages are the same thing. You look at Sheng, for instance. Again, what is that language? You really can't get it, but there's English in it, there's Swahili in it, there's Kikuyu in it, all these things that are coming in. And therein it developed a totally new type of a language, what you might want to call, in some instances, a totally new type of a culture has developed out of it. So yes, culture can be integrated into architecture, but it needs a bit of, it needs a thorough study of what are the cultural aspects that we are dealing with, and mostly, apart from the decorative element, what is the heart and soul of that particular culture? What is it that really ticks that culture, and how then are you going to represent that into architecture? So basically, that's how you'll be able to do it in architecture. Yeah.
Okay, wow. I'm actually feeling like I've just in downloaded a lot of good information, because I've heard that culture is about identity, like bringing out the identity of the people. So Maslamic is very much up there for me now, and I didn't know about this, but I'm about to obsess by it for the next few days. I'm going to be looking into it. I love how it brings out those social aspects of community, aspects of being part of the space where it stands, not just an eyesore that pops out and everyone is like, oh, that building that doesn't belong here. It's very much their own building, and they identify with it one way or another. I think that is brilliant. The social aspects, the sustainable aspects, they're satisfying to me as a built environment professional. Yeah, mumesikia nimejiita built environment professional. Wow, makofi tena.
Tumepiga kweli kweli. Yes. I mean, I think Annie captured it very well in terms of even how just the research that goes into ensuring that the buildings that are put in particular places not only reflect the people's heart and soul, because it's so hard to make something that is abstract tangible, or to make something that to concretize a concept is not that easy. So just figuring out who are the people, what do they like, what don't they like, what makes them who they are, how can they identify themselves, or how can the buildings reflect who they are, either in the way that they move within that space, or even just looking at it. They might not necessarily have to have entered the space to feel like, yes, something about this thing just vibes with me. So I think that is brilliant. And the fact that every project starts with a lot of questions, because I think it's easy to just pop into a place with solutions without necessarily asking deeper questions to kind of understand the why instead of just the what. So yeah, it is brilliant.
A lot of professionals do walk into places and solve a problem that no one asked them to, or they solve a problem that they solve something they think is a problem, but have they really asked the people being affected by this? Is it really a problem to you? Yeah.
Yes, because I agree with you. You're not the user. Just because you're the one who's creating it and you're the expert, it doesn't mean that you're the person who will be in that space day to day.
Yeah. You guys heard about this project that was done somewhere in some the more arid, semi-arid areas of Kenya, I think maybe northern Kenya. And the women of the community consistently would, they'd have to walk a really long way to the river, fetch water, and walk all the way back just to get now enough water to serve their families. So these guys were like, yes, you know what I'm talking about. They were like, yeah, need a borehole. yeah, we're gonna fix them up with a borehole. They never have to work long hours again. We're totally solving this problem in this space. The women will have so much more free time. But after everything was complete and they tried it out the first like few months, I guess, no one was using the borehole like at all. No one wanted that. People still would work the long hours. And why is that? Because the women were using this time to catch up. This was gossip time. This was tea time, you know? This was community learning time. So they would still prefer to walk the whole way, talk, catch up with each other, do each other's hair, come all the way back and have like a full day's water fetching, just because like maybe it was a problem, but did they really touch on the social aspects? Did they really ask themselves why this is something that's been happening in the community for a long time? Who are they solving the problem for?
Sometimes we think we're experts, and we come with all this schooling that we've gone through, formal schooling, and come up with ideas that gets totally rejected within the context that it sits in, and people just reject it. Like this borehole story, where you'd find such kind of things are prime time for quite a lot of people, and there's a project which is similar. We did that in 2009. There's a small island in Lamu, the Greater Lamu, called Faza, and one of the biggest problems was actually water, getting clean water. There was a well, and unfortunately, at that time, the town got razed down by fire. So we were one of the first respondents who went in to offer community service, and just to be able to see how then, number one is we can offer shelter to people, and number two, solve the problem for future. And then we gave out our designs and all that. Some of the designs were implemented. And again, one of the things that we're looking at is, again, this element of water. How can we solve it? And in the immediate part is people have been displaced because of fire. Can we be able to put up some temporary structures? So we actually did, together with the Kenya Red Cross Society, design some temporary structures that then people can easily be able to move into those temporary structures as their houses are, the place is getting cleared, and maybe looking at a revival strategy for the town. Those tents were never inhabited, because why would you go and live in a tent? And nobody just actually moved in. People preferred to move into their neighbors, in as much as the house is crowded. People prefer to move in with their neighbors and with the people that they know, rather than putting up in a tent, which to them was almost like an alien kind of a structure. And they're like, no, I'd rather move in with my aunt, I'd move in with my neighbor, I'd move in with my friends who are going to shelter me for a while until I find a footing to rebuild the house or something like that. So yes, that happens. Although again, there is also this other idea or notion that sometimes you need to be able to almost shock society by coming with something totally alien, something totally new. Again, this is another school of thought. Like I'm saying, in architecture, you have all these different types of thoughts, which are quite interesting, and sometimes you actually apply them into the designs. And there's the element of shock that you just do a building, everybody's looking at that building at that moment in time, and people are getting shocked. A good example, for instance, would be the Sydney Opera House in Sydney. When it was being built, it's like, what is this monstrosity that's coming up?
Hey, Sidney. Sorry.
Yeah, but look at it. Look at it now. It's when you think Sydney, you think that, I mean, whenever you think Sydney, you think that. And at that particular moment in time, it was like a totally alien kind of structure that is being put up. In contrast to the KICC, for instance, our own KICC. When you think of Nairobi, most of us think of KICC. Where cultural integration has been really, really well done together with the Norwegian architect, in terms of how then can you apply a foreign type of architecture, which is from the Scandinavian countries where they're using a lot of timber and all that, and how then that has been very well integrated within our local context. Actually, I believe in Africa, there is no building that is really standing out as a cultural manifestation of a people rather than KICC itself. So I can't think of any, frankly speaking. We have tried to do something, but still, I think in terms of its placement and in terms of its iconography, it really stands out as a major landmark that has been really, really successful in being able to integrate two different cultures, and the local culture can be able to be really seen within itself. And I'm sure somebody from Scandinavia, when they come through, they can actually be able to look at that building and say, yeah, this actually building is quite a reflection of our own cultures.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's
Maybe
quite interesting.
Yeah, it is quite interesting. Maybe TBD could embark on the challenge to try and find other African buildings that can compete with the KICC. Because now that you've mentioned that, I actually can't think of like a significant African icon, like an iconic building. You get me? Louis, can you?
No,
I
imagine.
can only think of KICC right now. I don't
And the
know.
only other thing I can think that would parallel that is not even a building. And again, it's in Nairobi. I think it's the monuments, the statues that they have around Nairobi. That's the thought that was placements and everything. That in itself also had a big part of the culture from Nairobi.
Yeah, I was low-key worried you'd say the pyramids. I was about to tell you that's not a building.
Oh yes, there's a pyramid. But for sure, I'm going to be cheeky a little bit, but yeah, for sure, KICC has integrated a whole lot of culture, even aspects of culture that we do not see coming. So anyway, what I'm alluding to is how a building itself has become a whole story. With this, I want to call it an urban legend because I'm not sure if it's like verified or not. You said there's the collab between the Kenyan and the Swedish architects. Locally, people believe that the origins of KICC was a bit, how do I say it? Was very interesting, to say the least, and very suspicious. Sus buildings with this Kamba architect, if I remember correctly. Some guy who was saying the CG came from the genitalia of a donkey. Essentially was the inspiration for KICC. I find that wild. And I find the fact that people actually believe that. I don't know if it's true. Maybe you guys can tell me.
Someone could debunk this. Yasir, can you tell us the truth?
No, not really. Usually, not really. No, it didn't come from that. But usually the main now, if you're going into architectural theory, one of the things they usually talk about is that these tall buildings, skyscrapers and the like, those ones that would usually stand erect, cities are a symbol of male dominance. If you look at it, because it's an imposition. A lot of the times in architecture you would associate tall structures as being masculine, whereas sprawling structures would be feminine. Sprawling and really intricate structures would be kind of feminine and much more accommodative, and that is how then you'd find a building like the KICC being referred to as a masculine kind of a structure with having masculine connotations type. That is normal in architecture, and that's a theory that is usually quite used in architecture. I mean, if you look at a building, it wants to stand on its own. It doesn't want anything around it. Quite different from sprawling structures, which are quite intricate. For instance, if you are to go to Lamu, where you have these buildings that are close to each other, they're almost like hugging to each other. That's the feminine part of architecture, where the sense of community comes in. People would want to hug to hug around each other and to be close to each other. You know, that talk of you're going to the water hole, and you know it's a time where people can actually be able to gossip and be able to talk together. So that's in architecture. Those kind of theories where you have the masculine part of architecture and then you have the feminine part of architecture. Masculine part usually being these tall, imposing structures, almost like identifying themselves, and they don't want anyone around it. And then you have these sprawling type of structures, which are much more intricate, much more accommodative, much warmer, and much more inviting than these tall structures, which usually are actually putting you off and putting you out. The other building of a masculine structure, the one that you can think of, is this one in Upperhill, the UAP building. I mean, you look at it, it's quite an imposition in the skyline of Nairobi, and you'd want to look at it from afar, and you know, it's a building that you really don't appreciate it. It almost feels like it's pushing you off from the street. Even I'm sure if you're walking on that particular road, you would want to walk on the other side of the road and not
Yeah.
next to it.
Not underneath it, like not right next to it. It like cross the road and be like,
you actually feel that you are being pushed off. The other one is Londro Tower. Again, it's the same thing, you know, within Nairobi. If you walk underneath it, you'd want to walk across on the other side. The reason being is there's a shade on the other side. There's a canopy that has been put through on the other side of the street, whereas Londro Towers doesn't have one. And therefore almost feels like it's kicking you out of that street. The other one, with the canopy above your head, you know, you feel warm, you feel protected. This other one is like this guy is looking above you like a giant, and you don't want to be near him. So again, there are all these kind of things in it's quite intimidating. There are all these kind of things that happen in architecture, and yes, they do affect our how we perceive our environment and how we behave within that particular environment.
I was actually, as you were talking about the masculine and feminine buildings, I was running through some images in my head, and I'm wondering, is it likely that most masculine buildings are mostly in commercial areas, while the feminine ones are in more residential spaces? And why would that be? What's the thinking around that?
Most probably, but also not so. I mean, if you look at some other commercial spaces, with some of these commercial spaces that we have, for instance, like the malls that are around, and you compare, for instance, Village Market and another one, maybe the Sarit Center, and you look at them, all of them are commercial spaces. But you'd immediately feel one is masculine, the other one is feminine. If you look at the Village Market, there's a warmth in it, with all its intricacies and its welcoming nature. Whereas when you look at the Sarit Center, it feels hard. It feels hard and heavy, in as much as more or less they are almost at the same scale as such. So I don't think it's about whether it's a residence or it's commercial spaces. I think it is just the attitude towards how you design a particular space. And that is what will make it feminine and what will make a certain building feel masculine. So one of the things that then we might want to be able to integrate within its architecture is, what are these feminine qualities in architecture? And one of the things that you're looking at is obviously the element of warmth. You're looking at being invited, being protected. These are some of the elements that you would think of when it comes to feminine type of architecture, whereas masculine type of architecture is usually hard, strong, almost pushing you away, wanting you to go, wanting you to move extremely fast. And this is what happens in some whether commercial spaces. You find they're quite hard, almost wanting you to go away. You don't want to stay there as long as you can. You just want to stay there for a short period of time and you move away. Whereas some other commercial spaces are quite warm and inviting, and you'd want to stay there on hours on end, just being relaxed.
Yeah.
Are there some guiding principles that would help determine in a brief what to apply in which context?
Yes, it depends on what it is that you're looking at. Now, now you're looking at commercialization of spaces, and you would want to ask yourself, do I want people to stick around and spend nothing? That's one of the questions that a lot of commercial spaces would ask themselves. If I make this particular environment so intricate and so intimate, I'll have people staying here for longer. And then will these people be able to spend? I think that is that's the part that you'd be asking yourselves. And therefore, if a person is feeling comfortable within a certain space, how much would they be able to spend? So you'd find most of these spaces, therefore, their prices would be slightly higher. Because you're staying there for longer. And therefore, it means if I'm buying something which I would get at 100 shillings from another place here, I would buy it for maybe 200 shillings or even more. Because of the time I've spent in that particular space. It could have been spent by somebody else. Whereas when you want people to just spend and move, then you have all these hard kind of spaces where you just want to channel people out. You just buy and you move. Good examples are your supermarkets, which are brightly lit. You listen to the kind of music that is being played in supermarkets. It's not those calming music, but it's fast-paced music to make you shop extremely fast and you get out. Fast food restaurants are other places where you'd find the environment is quite hard and harsh. They don't want you to stay. They want you to buy and move. That's the whole essence. You go to some other places where now they're fine, whatever it's called, like fine dining restaurants. It is much calmer, much quieter. Even the kind of music they play is a much softer music. They want you to stay. A glass of water would cost you 500 shillings, whereas you would get the same thing in the supermarket at maybe 100 or 50 shillings or something like that. So those are the differences that you'd be looking at. So yes, there are elements where these things are applied, and good architects would be able to apply them extremely well, and make you feel comfortable within a certain space and make you feel uncomfortable within a certain space. The same thing comes into urban design within our urban centers and our urban streets. We would be looking at how are we designing our urban streets? Do we want people to stay within our urban centers? Do we want them to move out within our urban centers? And even in Nairobi, you look at it, there are some certain spaces that actually push you out within that particular urban space vis-a-vis other spaces that are actually quite nice to walk and just feel comfortable and safe within that environment. A good example, again, if you look at Upperhill, I don't know if any one of you has ever walked at Upperhill at 6 o'clock in the evening. I bet none. I don't know whether anyone would drive in those streets at night. I mean, I sometimes use that road. It's quite empty. Compare that, for instance, with the CBD, or compare that with Westlands, for instance, where you can actually be able to walk and feel safe and feel comfortable. And in contrast to a place like Upperhill. So again, it comes up at various levels, all the way from intricate spaces, commercial spaces, retail spaces, all the way up to the urban scale. And as architects, then we need to ask ourselves, what kind of an environment do we want to create within this particular area, in this particular zone? Again, going back to the idea of culture into architecture, one of the things that we're looking at as an African culture, one of our main focus is actually community, and therefore, if you're to do a development, does it enhance the sense of community, or does it cut off that particular sense of community? And as our design, if I'm to design a building or a house or whatever that it is, does it foster that, or does it sever that element of community? And therefore, we should be cognizant on what exactly that we would be doing. There's a project we did, for instance, in Kilimani. It was an apartment block. And when we were doing that, we immediately informed the client that we will need to have commercial spaces at the lower floor. And the client was really against it. It's like, no, we're going to put a boundary wall. All apartment buildings in Kilimani put a boundary walls. Why do you want to open it up at the ground floor? And we insisted we have to do commercial spaces, because that is how you invite the public. That is how you interact with the street. Reluctantly, he agreed. after the building has been put up, he's actually coming back and he's quite happy. He's actually smiling right now. Whenever I meet with him, it's like that was a really good move we did, because it has really opened up that particular street. It has made that particular street safe. Apart from having a much more in terms of income, he's actually getting much more in terms of income. Now he has all those shops which are paying premium. If he had put a boundary wall there, he would not be getting any income. So again, looking back in terms of our culture and how we do our designs in terms of whether it's a house or whether it's a commercial space or whether we are doing a whole city, again, the sense of community becomes very important, I think, for us. And I think for every people, sense of community is really, really important. And then how do we integrate that community, sense of community within our designs becomes quite a challenge and quite an issue to be able to be dealing with.
Yeah, there's a lot you've dropped over there that I'm still stewing in, that I think is really true. And that I agree with a lot. I think that this entire episode has just been me ad-libbing. Unaweza fikiria mimi ni rapper. Yeah, that's right. I agree. Was it this?
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also giving me a very interesting perspective of Nairobi CBD and the way it's built. I'm just like, oh, that explains that. So,
Especially on the different parts of Nairobi, and how one place makes you feel this way when you're interacting with the space. Places where you'd want to stay longer, there are places where you just want to do your business. So there's something that there's something I came across when I was looking at some of these magazines on urban design, and how places where they'd like to design a city where it's mostly, it goes back to, it cuts across a different theme, pedestrian-centric cities and things like that. So if you would, for example, in the CBD, reduce the number of, let's say reduce along Moi Avenue, it's 2 lanes on both sides, to and fro. If you like reduce the number of lanes, probably reclaim 1 lane from the road. Then you have more spaces for the pedestrians. You can give them now stalls, give stalls to like the, what do you call these guys? The hawkers, to like formalize them, to at least give them a space where they can now like sell their things, make it a bit neat. People will be able to now come, they're walking, hakuna haraka, they're looking around at their different elements within there are different stuff that's being sold by the hawkers and whatnot. There's there's a lot more money flowing through within the city, so you're already getting a lot more cash flow, is the word that I was looking for. While at the same time now you have a place where people now feel like they look forward to going now to the CBD to be able to do business and also see what's there has to offer. Slowly by slowly the landscape changes. I'll try and find the article about it, but it was really interesting on it. And then now, from what you were saying about the example you gave on Upperhill and was that a place like Westlands or something like that? Yeah, that drove that point home for sure.
Yeah, I mean, pedestrian-centric designs are a thing to go by. I was having a meal with a friend the other day, and we're having this very bad meal. These ones that we usually thinking I need to cut them down because I'm growing fat, and growing, gaining weight seems to be catching up much faster than losing it. And we are asking ourselves, why is it that, for instance, and he was commenting that Italians eat a lot of cheese and pasta. Why are they not growing fat? And we started analyzing that. It's like, that's really why is that so? And we came up to one conclusion: the streets are walk friendly. Our streets are not.
Yeah.
And from my home, I'll jump into my vehicle, drive to my office. I will walk. I will drive back. I will get into home. I will sit onto my couch and watch TV. Life ends in Nairobi at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. In other places of the world, life begins at that time, because after 6 after work, that's where you have me time really. And you'd want to take a stroll, you'd want to go to the cafe, you'd want to walk to your neighborhood, coffee joint or whatever kind of a joint that you'd want to go there, sit with your neighbors, sit with your friends, have a chat until 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock into the night and come back. And, by that time you would have done a few kilometers, so forth and so on. And then, by just doing that it's walk-friendly places, it becomes very easy to be able to do that. Yeah. So when you look at Nairobi is not walk-friendly, whereas other cities would be walk-friendly.
Yeah.
My first time I traveled to China, and I remember this quite clearly. It was on a Monday, and I think it was like around 9 o'clock, going to 10 o'clock at night. And we've gone to this particular place. There are people sitting, having coffee, having tea, wherever it is that they're doing. Some old folks are seated by outside and they're chatting away. And then there's this huge plaza, and I was seeing kids, with their roller coasters doing, all sorts of kind of things. There's another group that was doing kind of yoga on the side. Then there are all these kids who are running around. And I asked my friend, how to hana homework? It's a Monday. They don't have homework. What's
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That says something about society.
Yeah, look at it. I mean, your kids get home at 6 o'clock or something like that. They
Yeah.
are inundated by homework, and by the time
Down the road again by 6
they're
a.m.
out, yeah, I mean it's a very bad life, and unfortunately that's what Nairobi is. And then I ask myself, if we're doing so much homework and so much schoolwork, we should be a superpower by now in terms of
Yeah.
I mean,
How
how is it? These kids are playing at 9 o'clock at night. Are they not going to school? It's a Monday. Are they not going to school? The same thing happened again in Egypt. And you go to Egypt, the same kind of things. I mean, on a weekday, you'd find the streets are full of people. And I'm asking myself, don't they have work to do in the morning or whatever that it is? Life begins at 6 o'clock in most parts of the world. In Nairobi, life ends at 6 o'clock. And all that is because we have made our streets unwalkable and not inviting in a way quite contrary to how our communities are. Our communities, again, going back into culture, whereas we should have been cognizant that our life as an African people is actually outdoors. We just go indoors to go and just sleep. That's really, when you look at the designs of most of these cultural spaces that we have, whether it is the Maasais, the Kikuyu and all that, the house is actually just a place to lay your head and protect you from the elements as you're sleeping. But most of the time, almost 80% of the time is spent outdoors. Therein, then as a people, we need to be able to relook into ourselves and just relook in terms of our own architecture and in terms of our own urban design and urban planning, because that becomes quite something that brings tension within our lives. That we do not have a sense of community. The streets are not inviting us to walk. The streets are not inviting us to become a community. We are getting more and more isolated with each other, and within it you have a society that is full of tension, a society therefore that develops to become quite an angry society, because we do not have that sense of community anymore, or that sense of community has been diminished because of how we have been designing our buildings and
everyone is trying to stay off the streets.
Exactly, yeah. So again, therefore, as a people, we should be able to look at our culture when we're designing that as people in the built environment. When we're designing our cities, when we're designing the house, how can we be able to bring that element of community within these particular spaces, and therefore be able to make that place much more livable. One of the regrets I have, for instance, with the FCB Mihrab is actually exactly that. I realized it a bit later, And one of the things that I realized was something wrong that we did was to be able to raise the building above the ground. If you're walking on that particular street, you're walking against a boundary wall. I realized that a little bit later as we were doing the construction, and I actually went back to the client and asked him, can we take that top floor, that wall, and bring it down so that then the building can be able to interact with the pedestrian. But unfortunately, that at that time the boat has already sailed, and the realization came much later on. I mean, if you could imagine, the podium of that particular building was at a level where it's at a walking level. As you're walking the streets, you can actually see the ground of that particular building. You can imagine how it would have opened up that particular corner. But it's something that we missed. And to date is something that I look back and saying, if tomorrow I'm going to get a project similar to that, I will not do that again. I would actually bring the podium of the ground level of that building at the lower level, so that then it can be able to interact with the person who is walking on that particular street. Right now, we behaved exactly like what most architects would do in terms of the masculinity of the building, in that it is standing on its own, and it's like, exposing itself that this is who I am, and quite masculine in its setting and in its design. As you go into the interiors, that's something else, but at least on the presence of it all, it's actually standing out as a masculine building, a no-nonsense kind of a building. And especially if you're walking on the street next to it, that's the kind of feel I would get. And I would have wished that that particular podium was lowered to almost like a walking level, and people can be able to interact with it. Yeah, so those are some of the things. I think, like I'm saying, architecture is a learning process. Like to date, we are still searching and questioning a lot of things. We are still learning quite a number of things as we move on. And yeah, it's an exciting journey to be able to put all these pieces together, and through experiences and through reading and through learning, be able to continuously improve yourself. And every project that you are doing, you're asking yourself, how can it be sensible? How can this particular project be sensible? How can it make sense within its own setting, whether it is in the design of the interiors or its relationship to its neighbors? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a whole lot. Let me ask, unless there's anything like very, very serious, I want to ask something that I want to see if we can get our audience to engage in, to properly see if, from what we're talking about, to properly experience it, to properly be able to internalize and see just how important it is to involve, like you said, to involve the community, to imbue culture, that's one, and also to involve the community where they can, especially going back to the story that Anne was giving about the well and the borehole and all that. So anyway, that long-winded pretext just to ask, so what three buildings would you say what three buildings around Nairobi, around Kenya actually, would you recommend our listeners to go look at, that you think embody the Islamic architecture, not just Islamic, but also just proper cultural design in their buildings, or in their, if it's a whole mixed-use development or a city? What three places would you recommend?
The KCC is definitely one. It's a major it's a major building, and I think it has all those and it's looking at it that it's been done many years ago. It's still standing out as, I would say, the frontier in terms of what good architecture is all about. Other places you can be able to visit, obviously the old town within the coastal strip, whichever old town, whether it is in Lamu, it is in Malindi, it is in Mombasa, and so forth and so forth, all the way down into some of these areas that are not in Kenya, Dar es Salaam, Zanzibar, Pemba, going all the way down to Mozambique, into the Mozambican area. It's unfortunate that Somalia is quite a problem right now, but also they have very good cultural cultural places that somebody can be able to visit and be able to look at. The other one is basically just our rural homes. I mean, when you go there, let's just have an open eye. How our education has been structured in a way that we end up abhorring our own cultures. that's unfortunately how our education system has been, especially for some of us who have gone through the formal system of education. We've always looked at our own cultures and looked at it as a backward kind of a society. And sometimes these are engineered systems of education for us to be able to think that way. But actually, we have so much to offer in terms of our own cultures and in terms of our own settings. If you go back to your own home, Shags, wherever that you come from, have a critical view of that particular place that you're living in and see how peaceful and comfortable it is, in as much as it might seem rundown. But think of it, how comfortable that is. I usually give this thing, and I usually tell my friends, when I go down to Coast to my mom's place, and immediately I get in there and I remove my socks and I sit down on the floor, I could actually feel the tension oozing out of my toe fingers and my body. There's that form of relaxation that I usually get that is so deep and it feels so good. So those are the places probably that somebody would want to be able to go to in terms of building manifestation as a building by itself. KCC would stand out. The old cities at the coast and also just our rural homes. The only thing that when we go there, we should have an inner eye to look at it. Put all the prejudices aside and just look at that home and how it actually works and how warm it is and how welcoming it is as compared to the apartment or the house that you live in Nairobi. Totally different. And then we ask ourselves, why is this home, which is rundown, is giving me a peace of mind? And the other one, which is filled with all these high-tech gadgets, it's built with modern way of construction, is not giving me a peace of mind. What is it? And in that, then we can be able to find answers to some of the issues that are troubling us as a people. And sometimes it's good to be able to look back and then look forward. That this is what we have done before. How can we make it better and be able to implement that into the architecture that we do on a day-to-day basis?
Wow, so cool. So cool. There's a lot of projects out there. I think we already put many places down in the bucket list so I can go check out baadaye.
Yeah.
Na tumewaput on game also. So umepata places ya kwenda road trip pia.
Yasir na to perform.
Kabisa.
Yeah, but that is very interesting places you can visit. I've been fortunate to visit a lot of places around the country. I've gone to the northern frontiers and the eastern and the western frontiers of this country, and we would do that sometimes with a bunch of our friends. Would go on a camping trip all the way up. At one point, went all the way up to Sibiloi in Turkana, just the northern part of Turkana, huko kabisa, next to the Ethiopian border, Lake Turkana. On this other side of Turkana, of Lodwar, and further up to Lodwar, or the western part, and you go to places and you really get amazed by the kind of local interventions that are being done in terms of just when you're looking at it since we're discussing architecture, just the local interventions regarding just the house, the dwelling, and just the setting within that particular space and how welcoming that particular environment is as compared to Nairobi, which is really not welcoming.
Yeah.
So yeah, those road trips, you do those road trips. It's nice to be able to go to places and see. When you go to a place, you think that this place would be quite harsh, alien, and people would repulse you, but actually people would actually welcome you with open arms, and they would actually sit with you and show you that this is what it is, this is what we do. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, it's considering when we started this, you basically said there's the outside, how a place looks, the packaging basically, and there's the heart of it. So
Yeah.
I quite like it. All right.
It's nimeshindwa hata kufunga episode because I'm like, there's so much.
I know there's so much. This was so interesting. I've learned so much.
You would definitely need to go and see these places. And also, if there's one building,
with that new lens,
yeah, if there's one building that I am definitely looking forward to see happen or be built, because I think it's not been built yet, is it's the Meru mixed-use development I've seen from your portfolio. Place looks really cool.
Mm.
Right. Yeah. That is a project we had done several years ago.
Oh, really? So
Um,
it's there.
No, it hasn't been done yet.
Oh, okay.
If you're talking about the one in our portfolio, no, it hasn't been done. That has not been done. It ended up into a proposal stage. Unfortunately, the client, I think, was looking for finances. Those things don't come easy at times. So yeah, it didn't happen. It ended up as it just ended up as a proposal, but not as a built space.
No, but from the way it looks and the interesting features that it has, I think, yeah, it's something else that we'd really like to look. Oh, but there's a thought that has just come to my mind. There's something you mentioned about the education, how education and how the systems has been engineered to sort of make us want to like erode our culture or abandon our culture and take in something a bit more generic, which I agree with 100% because it goes back to this idea of, and you've touched on it, this idea of if you look back at the rural houses, like you've mentioned, if you go look at these places, think rural, think way back when pre-colonial times, I'd say even. If you go to a place like Bomas of Kenya, I think they still do have those different buildings from the different communities, right? So like what
Yeah.
your house would look like, what a Masai in Manyata would look like. And if you see, it's basically just typically mud rather construction. So something that we've grown to think is, yeah, it's backwards, it's rural, it's outdated. But then we look at concrete, we look at stone and everything else. And comes in, this is a hot take of mine, I'll just say. So you'd find that at some point, the same materials that we used before is like repackaged and now educated to us as nature-based solutions. Which if you think about it already.
Exactly
Okay,
that. That's
I feel very strongly about this, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is how our minds are getting played on a day-to-day basis. I remember when I was young, I was told, oh, eating avocados is not good for your heart. I don't know, eating a lot of eggs is not good for your heart. All these traditional type of foods. So you don't, thinking that they're actually not good for your heart. Later on, they repackage it and tell you, avocado is a superfood. You should be having eggs every day. And I'm like, huh? These are the same guys who told us that these things are not good. That these are the same guys who are now telling us that this is the best thing that can ever happen to an individual. It's the same thing again, just the play around with our minds. They tell you, oh, this is backward systems, even the way the education is structured. You never get to be taught about those kind of things. If you go to architecture school, I'm sure you'd be a master of Western architecture more so than being a master of your own local type of architecture, unfortunately. And then you're told, oh, these things is mad, I don't know, it's backwards and all that kind of a thing. And then they come back and repackage it and tell you, oh, to be sustainable, we need to be using local materials. We need to be able to use mud, can be actually a form of construction, and it can actually be able to give you very good buildings and so forth and so on. So it's that whole kind of education mind play system, which as people, then we should be able to critically look back at that. And now that you get to a certain age where you actually come to a realization that you can actually critically think, and to critically think about what we are actually told is not good might actually be the best.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just feel strongly about that. But anyway, still, I think the idea over here is to rethink and see that these solutions actually are from where we came from, or at least where we started. And that is, if you think of the essence of sustainable architecture and sustainable design in general, is that ability to be able to have a built environment that meshes all of the natural. So by incorporating the elements from the natural and to make the build is one very easy way of building sustainably. Anyway, just a random thought that came to mind. But yeah, I think that's it. We would have made this episode a bit longer, but because of time, and I'm assuming since most of you listen to us when you're doing something, Mushamaliza. So anyways, thank you very much thank you very much, Yasir, for making time for this episode. It's been very, very educative and entertaining at the same time.
Yeah, very, very. Makofi tena. It's honestly been very informative, very like I was immersed. I was learning something new. I was thinking differently, and at the end he reminded us to think critically about what we already know and apply what, feels correct or, in our context. So for me, this was awesome. And the fact that he kept mentioning Sydney, but our Sydney wasn't. It was like the Sydney opera. I'm like, yes, Sydney. Sydney, yeah, usiseme hatukukuita. Don't say we didn't call you, sir. But yeah, for me, it's honestly been, we've downloaded a lot of information, but a lot of really important and useful information in our growth as, built environment professionals. Yeah. Lian, kwa maoni? Do you have maoni? What is maoni?
Yeah. My maoni is a few, but mostly I think this episode really resonated because for me it was mostly about the people, how the people feel, how the people are, how the people exist in a space, their culture, everything that forms a person has been considered in architecture. Because I feel like most of the times when I'm moving within a space, it feels like it was created not for people. It's the art itself without the soul. So the fact that he was touching mostly on the abstractness, because it's so hard, even in this our economy, for guys to appreciate the invisible work that goes into something that is tangible.
Mm.
So that I think for me was, you know what, nimefunzwa kunyamaza for hii episode, which is amazing. So thank you so much, Yasir.
That is quite a feat, huh?
Thank you for hosting me. It's been exciting. I think these kind of talks you can go on and on and on and on. It's because they're quite exciting and they really touch us and they resonate with whatever that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was a pleasure being with you.
Oh, thank you for making the time.
Yes. And also thank you guys for listening to another episode. You can continue if there's thoughts that you have, burning thoughts. You can reply to from wherever it is that you listen to us. If it's podcast, drop a comment, rate a rating, whatever. Also on our socials, TBD_Kenya. On everywhere. Yes, on everywhere.
On every platform.
Yes. Or aside from Facebook. I don't think we're on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
On every platform
Yeah.
except Facebook.
Anyway, I think that's it. So until next time, guys, keep dreaming, keep designing, ambition to action. And yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
That was for the audience. All right.